Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and thank you to the New City Jewish Center for hosting this morning's forum. My name is Mike Lawler. I currently serve in the New York State Assembly. Born and raised in Rockland County. I've lived here my whole life. My family's been here over 100 years in the county. I'm running for Congress because one-party rule does not work. For the first time in our nation's history, Democrats control everything in Washington, Albany, and New York City all at once. And they've created a mess. A 41-year record high on inflation, surging crime, skyrocketing energy prices, a porous southern border, where not only a massive inflow of illegal immigration, but drugs coming into our communities, killing 300 Americans a day. And parents being labeled domestic terrorists by the Department of Justice for simply asking questions about their children's education. We need to restore balance and common sense to every level of government. And that's why I'm running. I have among the most bipartisan voting records in Albany. I have voted for common sense gun safety measures. I have voted to ensure that parents have a say in their children's education. I have worked to cut middle-class taxes, increase school funding for our schools here in Rockland County. I've led the effort to repeal the disastrous cashless bail law, which has made our communities less safe. At the end of the day, we need to have a representative who understands Rockland County, who will fight for Rockland County, who will be here in Rockland County. And I am fortunate enough to have your vote on Tuesday, I will be your voice in Washington. I have voted with Carl Hastie 81% of the time. Nobody would confuse us for being in agreement on every issue. But ensuring that I am representing this community and this district requires working across the aisle, and I will do that.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be at the New City Jewish Center. Thank you, Men's Club. My name is Sean Patrick Maloney. I don't come from money. I don't come from a political family. My mom and dad raised 6 kids, 5 sons, and a daughter with a very serious developmental disability. My dad got banged up on the USS Manchester, went to work at a steel mill in Pennsylvania. That's how he started his marriage. He ended up selling insurance. My mom never got to go to college, but she was the smartest woman I ever met. And they raised 6 of us with a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice and a lot of love. And my husband Randy is here this morning, and my daughter Daly, one of 3 kids we've been raising for 29 of the 30 years we just celebrated together this year. And we learned a couple weekends ago we're going to be grandparents. And I will tell you, I know what you're thinking, you look too young. But the point is that it's the middle class, mainstream values that I was raised with, that so many of you were raised with, that are the heart of this campaign. And the choice in this campaign is between a mainstream candidate with a record of delivering results for you, or a MAGA movement that is going to take away women's reproductive freedom, that's going to do nothing about gun violence, and that traffics side by side with the worst, most violent elements in American society, including vicious anti-Semites and racists, white supremacy groups, right-wing militias, the people who stormed the Capitol. There is poison in the soil, and it is racism and anti-Semitism out of which this MAGA movement has grown. And I will fight it with everything I've got. And I will condemn anti-Semitism in New York, and in Rockland County, and in anywhere I find it. I fought BDS. I stood up to the squad. I'm the candidate that beat those candidates 2-1 in the primary. I am the AIPAC endorsed candidate in this race. Every major Jewish group that has endorsed me. I passed 45 bills into law working across the aisle. And I look forward to discussing my record of results, and I look forward to your support on November 8th and earning it. Thank you very much.
Okay, question number 1 is about the topic most Americans feel is most important coming into this election: inflation. Inflation is robbing the American middle class, the poor and those on fixed incomes, of the gains they made in the last decade. The classic definition of inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. Is the federal budget too big? Reports from the Congressional Budget Office suggest that the Inflation Reduction Act, which Congressman Maloney voted for, will cost $740 billion and add 87,000 new IRS agents and cost the American middle class $20 billion in new taxes. Is this a good idea? Both candidates will get a response. Mike Lawler won the coin toss. Mike Lawler is up.
Thank you, Michael. Inflation is obviously the most important issue facing Americans right now. Seniors, working families, young people, everyone is struggling with the burden of inflation. It's a 41-year record high. And what my opponent did to deal with it was to increase taxes on middle-class families here in Rockland County. He voted to increase spending by over $4 trillion in 21 months. He voted to create 87,000 new IRS agents, which if anybody believes they're only going after the billionaires, I have a bridge to rename you on the Hudson. The reality here is this. We need to cut spending. We need to increase domestic production of energy. We should not be relying on OPEC and the Saudis and the Russians for natural gas. We have more natural gas in this country than anywhere else in the world. If we want to reduce the cost of energy, we need to increase production. That will help get inflation under control and reduce the cost of groceries and goods and manufacturing. That is the only way we're going to deal with this.
Well, I certainly appreciate the balanced way that question was asked, Mike. I mean, here's the truth about the Inflation Reduction Act. When you get off the Fox News talking points, that act is going to cap everybody on Medicare's out-of-pocket expenses at $2,000 a year for prescription drugs. He opposed it. I voted for it. That bill is why you have $10 million of big dark interest money floating around in his campaign, calling me names, because he's in the pocket of the big drug companies and I stood up to him. That's what the Inflation Act did. And on energy prices, we're talking about a revolution in green energy. We're not just reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% in 8 years, though it does that, leading the world. We are going to create millions of good green energy jobs here, increasing energy supplies. And yes, I support increasing production domestically and around the world, but we can also lead the world with renewable energy, and millions of jobs will come to the United States instead of China if we do that. That's the Inflation Reduction Act. Also put a 15% minimum tax on every big corporation. We have reduced the deficit, Mr. Mendick, by $1.4 trillion this year. This act will lower it another $400 billion. That's the truth about the Inflation Reduction Act. It's a great piece of legislation, and I am proud to support it.
Okay, question number 2 is energy independence. There's talk that there's going to be a diesel fuel and home heating oil shortage in the Northeast this winter. Should we be using our own American resources that we have available here, or should we keep importing increased quantities of oil from countries that dislike us, including Russia, which we were, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela? Congressman, you're up.
Right. Well, I serve in the House Intelligence Committee, and I am absolutely focused like a laser beam on standing up to Putin's aggression in Ukraine. By the way, if this MAGA crowd gets in, they're going to cut the legs out from under the Ukrainians, mark my word. So if you want to stand up to foreign dictators profiting off of oil sales, the way to do it is to join the fight for freedom in Europe right now. But yes, we should be energy independent, and it will be for a long time on fossil fuels, and I've supported energy projects and stood up to my own party on things like the Dan Scammer plant and on the Keystone Pipeline and have the scars to prove it. But I also think we can lead the world in new energy and renewable energy jobs. And we have put $370 billion in tax credits and loan guarantees in the Inflation Reduction Act so America, not China, can lead the world on battery production, on solar panels, on green energy jobs. And by increasing those supplies, we will lower costs over time. That is the way to be fully independent and to do something about the threat of climate change at the same time.
My opponent has voted 100% of the time with Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. And one of the first things Joe Biden did was, when he became president, restrict domestic supply of energy. Here's the bottom line. 60% of New Yorkers rely on natural gas to heat their homes and power their businesses. 70% of electricity is generated by natural gas. We have natural gas in our country. I believe in protecting our environment. I voted for the Environmental Bond Act that is on the ballot this year. We all want clean air, clean water, open space preservation. But we need to have a balanced approach to energy. When home heating costs are $5.99 a gallon, it costs the average homeowner over $1,000 to fill their tank. Seniors are being forced to make a choice between sitting in the dark with the heat off and wearing a sweater, or paying through the nose. This is a problem. If we want to reduce grocery costs, if we want to reduce the cost of home heating, if we want to reduce the cost of gas at the pump, we need to increase domestic production of energy. And by the way, if you want to protect the environment, we shouldn't be letting China, Russia, the Saudis, and others destroy the environment and rely on them for our energy.
Okay, we stay with energy. The Biden administration has been pumping oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to lower the price of petroleum products, and the level is now down to the lowest level since 1984. This is for both candidates, obviously. What is your opinion of this action? Mike Lawler, you're up first.
Well, this is what you do in an election year when you don't actually have a plan to address energy. You empty out the strategic reserve in the attempt to try and reduce prices right before an election. The problem is, guess what? Energy prices are going back up because we've emptied it out. We need to increase domestic production of energy. It's that simple. This is not rocket science. You know, in New York, Governor Cuomo shut down Indian Point without any plan to replace the 25% of power that was generated by it for the region. The Dan Scammer power plant, which we both supported, the Democrats blocked. You need to increase production. I'm all for renewables. I'm all for increased solar and wind and getting to net zero carbon emissions, but you need dispatchable energy. When the sun sets or the wind stops blowing, you need the ability to generate power. So if we want to lower costs, if we want to bring down the cost of living for people in the Hudson Valley, we need to have a real plan, which includes increased domestic production.
Yeah, look, I mean, what the heck is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for if you don't release it when there's a war in Europe and Russia takes 10% of the world's oil supply off the market? That's literally why we created it, ladies and gentlemen. And not only is it not empty, Mike, if you understood the issue, it's actually not nearly empty. The fact is that that's brought your gas prices down $1.30 a gallon. So if Mike Lawler wants you to pay another $30 a gallon, he should say so. I'm glad the president used the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And let's remember, I'm also the guy that stood up to big oil companies who are making record profits, by the way. Somebody's making money off of this war in Europe. Have you seen the profits of the big oil companies? I stood up to them. Mike Lawler is a lobbyist for the big oil and energy gas companies. That's how he made a living when he wasn't in the assembly. So you're not going to get anybody standing up to big oil who's literally traded political influence for money. I stood up to him and banned oil barge anchorages on the Hudson River. So when you look out on that Hudson River, for all time now, you won't see 43 ugly oil berths out there screwing up our waterfront development. You got to stand up to big oil, and you got to promote American energy, including renewables. And in the short term, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve exists to cushion the blow of a war like the one in Ukraine.
Gentlemen, remember you can use your rebuttals. There are 2 during the debate. Okay. This next question is for Congressman Maloney. It's about the supply chain. China's already come up. How would you solve the problem with the supply chain and help end our dependence on China for major items we need, like pharmaceuticals, and green energy has come up, and heavy metals for batteries, which the Chinese are buying up in Africa? Congressman?
Thanks, Mike. We just passed something called the Chips and Science Act. Have you guys heard about this? This is the most important legislation to bring manufacturing jobs back from China in your lifetimes. And just in the last few months, two private companies, Micron and IBM, have announced $120 billion of investments in upstate New York. Biggest thing since the Erie Canal. Building microprocessors right here. That's critical to our national security, but those jobs are also coming back from China. That's how you stand up to the supply chain issues, is you make things in America again. We can make things in America again, and we have done it. My opponent opposes the Chips and Science Act, made fun of it, but he doesn't have a plan of his own. We've also taken on the shipping companies and addressed the supply chain issues with the largest investments in our infrastructure since the interstate highway system. I can't find out whether my opponent supports fixing your roads, fixing your bridges. In other words, some people are working the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Other people are trying to make you mad to win an election. But between the infrastructure investments and taking on China with the Chips and Science Act, we're going to build things in America again, and we're going to lead the world.
China is our greatest geopolitical threat, both from a national security standpoint and from an economic standpoint. And you know, the supply chain issues are major, and the Biden administration made them worse for over 21 months. And I supported the CHIPS Act. I have no problem with the CHIPS Act. What I had a problem with was the total political posturing of the announcement. But the issue here is this. If you want to address supply chain issues, here's a start. Don't pay people to sit home. If we have able-bodied people, they should be working. They should be actually working in the ports. They should actually be helping move the goods and services across our borders into our communities. If you want to address China, take them on, hold them accountable for the intellectual property theft. If you want to take on and make manufacturing come back here, cut regulations, cut taxes. The problem in New York State is taxes are through the roof. We have over 750,000 business regulations in this state. We need to reduce the cost of doing business. That is how you actually address supply chain issues.
Good morning. Okay. The issue about securing the border. We have major drug issues in this country. Fentanyl is killing over 300 people per day. What can be done to secure the border to prevent cartels from pouring these drugs across the border? Take Assemblyman, you first.
Look, this is one of the biggest issues that we are dealing with right now. My wife, who's here today, is an immigrant from Eastern Europe. This is not about being against immigration. Immigrants enrich our communities, our culture, our economy. What this is about is a national security crisis at our border and a humanitarian crisis. Tens of thousands of migrants pouring across our southern border, and the Democrats didn't have a problem with it until about 50 of them were sent to Martha's Vineyard. The hypocrisy on this is ridiculous. The problem here is this. We have to secure our border. We have to prevent border towns and communities all across our country being overrun. But we have to deal with the cartels. They are killing over 100,000 Americans a year by bringing fentanyl into our communities. We have to take them on. We have to hold drug dealers and human traffickers accountable. They should be charged with murder and attempted murder anytime there is an overdose. You have to hold people accountable for this.
Well, if you've been listening closely, you notice that my opponent's a lot better at decrying problems than having anything as a workable solution. Here's what actually works. I chaired the Coast Guard subcommittee and rode along with the Coast Guard in the Caribbean and understand that's the work in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific, protecting our country from illegal drugs. And the fentanyl comes in, ladies and gentlemen, at legal border crossings, not at illegal border crossings. If you actually talk to the people who do this, you'd understand what they need is more equipment, more investments, more training. They need more x-ray machines. They need more bays to go through the trucks that bring this stuff in. They need to have the kind of resources that'll secure our border. And make no mistake, We need to secure our border. I support a strong border, absolutely. You need to come here the right way, you need to obey our laws. We also need to obey our asylum laws, ladies and gentlemen, and where people are fleeing communist persecution in Cuba or socialist persecution in Venezuela, we can give people a hearing with the United States of America, because the Jewish community of all communities understands that when people are fleeing political persecution, they ought to be able to see a judge before we send them back to their torment. And that is how you be tough and smart on the border.
With all due respect, you've had 10 years to do something about this, and you've done absolutely nothing. The reality is that, yes, asylum seekers, we need to increase the availability of judges to hear their case. But you cannot just continue to allow people to flood our communities and do nothing about the border crisis. You are not doing anything to hold the cartels accountable. You're not doing anything to stop the inflow of fentanyl. In fact, a few months ago, you said there's no real problem at the border. This is a major crisis. It requires a level of seriousness, and the fact is you have failed to do anything about it.
Working off the last set of questions, what about securing the border? Defending our national security, actually. The Biden administration continues to send state-of-the-art weaponry, such as Stinger and Javelin missiles, to Ukraine, depleting our own supplies. According to Raytheon CEO, it takes 2 years to replenish these weapons. Is this sound policy for our nation's national security, and why? And on top of that, Congress declined to add more agents to the southern border, but putting in 87,000 more IRS agents. Is this good for our national security?
It's fact.
Did that sound like a fair question to anybody in this room? Let's play in your ballpark, buddy. Here's the deal. Like, I'm on the House Intelligence Committee. I've been to the region. I've seen the young West Point grads defending freedom on the front lines over there. You know what? I'm proud of the United States of America standing up to Vladimir Putin. You should be too. And you know what else? If you think it's some choice between defending our border and defending freedom, I got another thing for you to understand, which is that in a $23 trillion economy, the United States of America can walk and chew gum at the same time. You bet I'm going to secure the southern border. You know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to use a bunch of women and kids who've been fleeing persecution and put them on a plane and send them to Martha's Vineyard in some political stunt for political reasons. And I'm not going to roll over while a murderous dictator runs wild in Europe. And the United States of America, by the way, which has lower inflation, stronger growth, and an easier go than the Europeans right now, should not cut and run when the Europeans are still in the fight. There are young Americans right now dedicating themselves to this effort. We should support them, and we should stand up to Putin and his murderous ways. Because when a dictator's loose in Europe, the Jewish community knows what comes next. If we don't defend freedom now, it's going to be in the Balkans, it's going to be in Poland, it is going to be NATO itself. That is what Donald Trump has always wanted, and this MAGA extremism, now is the time to defend freedom.
There's no reason to be unhinged. These are serious topics and require serious solutions, Sean. The reality is this. My wife is from Moldova. She is from Eastern Europe. Her family lives about 30 minutes from the Ukraine border as the crow flies. I've been there. I've been near Transnistria, which is Russian-occupied territory. We have an obligation as a nation to support Ukraine, and I will not waver in that support. We have an obligation both in terms of taking on Vladimir Putin, who is a vile dictator and a thug, and we have an obligation with respect to the treaty that was signed when Ukraine gave up their nuclear power. So we have to fulfill that commitment. The idea that 87,000 new IRS agents to go after middle-class, hardworking taxpayers in the Hudson Valley is more important than securing our border, I fundamentally disagree with, and that's why I oppose the Inflation Expansion Act. We need to secure our border. We need to support Ukraine. It's that simple.
it's a shame we didn't get a question on reproductive freedom since you just lost 50 years of it, but I guess that's not going to come up this morning. It's a shame we didn't talk about gun control because my opponent thinks 18 and 19-year-olds should be able to buy AR-15s. I'm going to do something about assault weapons. But let's do the rebuttal on this. Right? I mean, here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Kevin McCarthy has already told you. Marjorie Taylor Greene has already told you. They're going to cut funding for Ukraine. You cannot be in the pocket of $10 million of MAGA money, which is fueling my opponent's campaign, and then stand up to him on this. Trust me, you put this MAGA crowd in power, Ukraine will suffer. Transnistria will suffer. Moldova will suffer. And a murderous dictator will get away with murder in Europe. I'm going to stand up to him.
We have a question from the audience. How do you feel about the planes that brought undocumented people to the Westchester Airport? I believe Congressman, you were up next first.
Sure. Let's also talk about the lie that there's 87,000 IRS agents going after middle-class people. They've already said there'll be no audits under $400,000. Corporations are going to start paying. Rich people that have been getting away with murder are going to start paying. That's why you don't gut the IRS, so we can fund the government for people who are doing things the right way. All right, look, Westchester flights. I have been in the lead on demanding that we understand exactly who's coming in and when, and I will continue to be. But let's also understand how it works. When people have an asylum hearing, they're placed with sponsoring organizations. That guarantees plus 90% of them come back for their hearing. That's a good thing. And those all don't exist on the border. They exist around the country. That's the proper way to do it. The cruel, political MAGA way to do it, which I guess is a joke to my opponent, is to put kids on a flight to Martha's Vineyard and think it's funny. There has been a long-standing program to hear asylum cases. That's U.S. law, and we can do that while we defend our border. And we don't need to victimize kids, and we can put them with family members and veterans organizations and religious organizations who are the sponsors of these kids when they are moved around the country.
Again, 10 years to do something about any of this, and absolutely nothing. Look, the midnight flights into Westchester County Airport, Stewart Airport, Orange County Airport are problematic because there was no communication or coordination with local officials on the ground. And why not do it in broad daylight? Why are we doing it after Westchester County Airport shuts down at 11 p.m.? What is the purpose of that? There's no communication with respect to school districts. School districts are footing the bill for migrants that are coming into the communities. Obviously, we have to educate them. Nobody's coordinating with nonprofits and local governments with respect to the support that is required. You cannot have a system like this. It does not work. We need to have a common sense approach to immigration. We need to address the legal immigration system, which is totally broken. We need to address the illegal immigration system, which is totally broken. We need to address the asylum situation. You cannot continue to operate like this. This is why we have a problem.
Closing statements. And Congressman, you're up first. It's reverse order from the beginning.
Well, thank you very much to the New City Jewish Center. Thank you, Men's Club. Look, folks, you got a clear choice in this race. You can go with a guy that's got 45 bipartisan bills written into law over 10 years. I haven't solved every problem, it's true, but I'm a responsible adult up there working hard to do it. And I've worked with town supervisors and mayors and county executives across the aisle. I'm one of the most bipartisan people in the Congress. And I got beat up and had a primary over it. I stood up to BDS. I stood up to anti-Semitism. I'm going to decry it whether it happens in Rockland County or anywhere else. I'm going to condemn Kyrie Irving. I'm going to condemn Kanye West for the disgusting and vile anti-Semitism. I'm going to fight BDS on the floor of the House. I'm endorsed by AIPAC and J Street and DMFI and every major Jewish organization because of my strong support for Israel. I am going to fight for you every day to bring your costs down for groceries and gas, to fight for your reproductive freedom and your voting rights, and also to support safe streets, good policing. I brought back $7 million for good policing here in the Hudson Valley, and we just passed $300 million of funding out of the House for local police departments that do the most good in our communities. We can go forward together, but there is a MAGA crowd out there that attacked the Capitol on January 6th. Donald Trump's about to announce for president in a couple of weeks. We are going to have a choice to make in this country. And if anyone thinks you can play footsie with the MAGA movement and not encounter anti-Semitism, I got news for you. I was there on January 6th. I saw the t-shirts that said 6 million not enough, that said Auschwitz, Camp Auschwitz, that made fun of that. And we've got problems in the Democratic Party too. There are extremists on both sides. That's why you need a mainstream candidate who is not going to give in to this MAGA crap. That's not going to be a foot soldier in this Marjorie Taylor Greene or Kevin McCarthy army that's going to give you Hunter Biden investigations and nothing else for 2 years. We are working through some tough problems. If you give me 2 more years, I will keep working for you every single day. Thank you. And I'm asking for your support on November 8th.
I want to thank the New City Jewish Center for hosting this forum. Look, the choice in this election is stark. We can continue down the path of one-party rule, which has created an absolute mess across our country, or we can restore balance and common sense at every level of government. We know what the issues are. People are struggling to put food on their tables. They're struggling to put gas in their tank. They're struggling to pay for their home heating costs. They're fearful to go into New York City. And my opponent says, oh, there's no crime in the suburbs. Tell that to the deli owner who was just robbed of $50,000 in Yorktown Heights. There is crime, and we need to tackle it. The policies that have been enacted at the state level and in New York City have made our communities less safe. Our porous southern border, a massive inflow of illegal immigration and drugs pouring into our communities. He's not doing anything about it. He wants to talk about Donald Trump, January 6th, abortion, guns, because he has no plan to deal with any of this. He has no plan to deal with any of this. And you can hear his supporters. They think it's funny, but it's not. People are struggling. They're hurting. And you think it's a joke. That's great. The reality here is this. We need people who care about our community, who are going to stand up for it, who are going to fight for it. He's never represented here, and heck, until about 2 weeks ago when he realized he was about to lose, he didn't really show up here. The reality of this is that I will be your voice. I will fight for you. That's why I'm running. And on the issue of anti-Semitism, he has continued to promulgate this lie that I had something to do with a video. I'm the reason the video got taken down.
Who did it, Mike?
The reality of this is we need to stand up for this community, period. All right? So on November 8th, I ask for your vote so we can actually have change and balance and common sense in government.